Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. My name is Stephanie and today we are back with another installment of my brand recap series. This video is going to be dedicated to reviewing all of Cracked Polish's releases from 2024. Okay, actually maybe not all of them, because if you have been keeping up with Cracked Polish over the last couple of months at the very least, you might know that they have a lot of releases. Cracked was one of the few brands that had a new collection come out every single month, but on top of that, there were also a lot of other new releases, whether they were like these duos, these Jelly of the Month shades. She also had some charity polishes and some Facebook exclusive shades. So to be completely honest, I don't even know like everything that has come out. So just for the sake of simplifying things a little bit more, I am just going to be sticking to like the major collection releases and the Jelly of the Month shades, just because that alone is already a lot to talk about. So if you haven't seen any of my previous videos before, I am also going to be ranking the releases just because I think it's a little bit more fun to do that. So yeah, I will save more of my thoughts for the end. For now, let me just show you my tier list. Okay, so here is a look at my tier list. If you've already watched the previous videos and you're familiar with the ranking, you can just skip ahead. But if this is your first video, I'm just gonna break it down for you really quick. Usually a tier list goes from S through F, where S is the highest grade you can get. It is like perfection, while F would be a failing grade essentially. We don't really see that a lot in nail polish collections, so my personal lowest is gonna be D. And as you can see, I also renamed the tiers just because it's more fun that way. My S tier is called Flawless No Notes because again, it is basically perfect. The A tier is called The Vibes Are Immaculate because it is still a really, really great collection. There's just something that's kind of stopping it from being perfect in my opinion. Then for B, we have These Are Nice with that very specific smiley emoji because it's just so neutral. C is Smile and Nod, where it's just not my favorite release. I don't have like a lot of nice things to say about it maybe. And lastly, we have Boring Yawning, which is the Abby Lee Miller meme, which is just a more funny way to say this did not really interest me at all, unfortunately. So like I mentioned in the intro, Cracked has had a lot of releases over the last year. It's already like 2 full rows, but with the way that I'm like cropping it for the video, you probably aren't going to see it all, but I'm sure this is going to be probably the longest video out of my series. So starting in January, we got 2 releases. The first collection was called Young Love, and this was a little quad of these cream formulas. I actually think one of the shades, the dark brown called Chocolate Graham, was their first kind of like jelly finish. So that was exciting to see, but I remember not loving that shade. I think more so for the color. I just found it to be a little too dark or maybe just too smoky for me. Like, I love a good dark brown, so that unfortunately was a little bit of a letdown. And then the other shades, they were okay, like definitely very fitting for a January release in my opinion. And I love the theme, especially as a Libra, as a hopeless romantic. It is super cute, like doing a collection focused on these early like puppy love feelings. But I would say the theme for this release was the most exciting part for me. The colors, the formulas just like didn't stand out as much, where even though I do tend to like lighter colors and pastels, I feel like these were almost like too muted or too dusty for what I was craving maybe. So I am gonna put these in the C tier for Smile and Nod. I was initially thinking B because they're just kind of like solid shades, but compared to everything else we have, I'm already like, okay, we're definitely gonna have a lot of like better releases. So I imagine the B tier is gonna get pretty full, but I will just keep it in C for now. And the other release that we got in January was for the Pantone Color of the Year, which I think is such a fun thing for Cracked to do. Last year, we got the shade Peach Fuzz because the Pantone Color of the Year last year was a peachy color. I just don't remember like what they called it exactly. And I remember a lot of people like, not loving that, mainly the Pantone color. It's just not the most flattering maybe. I do think it is like a cute shade. And again, like I love the idea of doing a Pantone color of the year. But again, this one specifically just didn't really stand out to me too much. From what I remember, the formula was nice. I don't think I actually ever shared these first releases on my channel, but I don't remember having a bad experience with the formula. So, that part is good, but color-wise, I just wish that I loved it more, like maybe that it was a little bit brighter or more saturated. So unfortunately, I think I am gonna put this one in C behind the other creams, just because I feel like I would gravitate more towards those, like at least the pink and the blue, more than this peachy shade. Then in February, we got another 2 releases. The first was the full-size collection called Romanticize Your Life, and I really enjoyed this one. Majority of Crack's collections are 6 pieces, and this one was kind of like split into these 2 trios, if I remember correctly, where half of them were these, typical cutesy romantic pink kind of shades, and the other 3 were these like darker, more anti-Valentine's Day colors, which I think is so fun. Like obviously as a Libra, I'm obviously going to be drawn more towards like those cutesy romantic vibes, but I just really love seeing the other side of it so much. And I realize I'm just a big fan of taking any kind of collection and being able to split it into these smaller bundles. So that way, if you're not feeling the whole thing, you can still grab like half of them and still get like a little discount. Funny enough, I think the only shade that I didn't like in this collection was from the more like cutesy half of the trio, where I think it definitely worked well with like, the theme of the whole collection. It was just like my least favorite on me personally, but every other shade I feel like was such a beautiful, like it nailed it so well. So honestly, I'm gonna put this in the S tier. I just loved that lineup so much. Since it's come out, I feel like I've shared a couple of them on my channel and like other kind of favorites videos. It's just so pretty. Then the other release that we got in February was the Dan Duo, which I believe was released for Monique's birthday. Being a duo, it only has these 2 polishes, and they obviously have a very like silver monochromatic color scheme going on, where one of them is like a silvery metallic and the other is this like gunmetal magnetic sort of formula. So, it's cool. I think if I remember correctly, it was inspired by Monique's like love for fashion. This might be another release that I didn't end up sharing on my channel, so I don't actually remember how I felt about these, like trying them on myself. But as far as like the finishes go, the kind of theme, even though, I'm not really like a fashion person, so I just can't really connect with it that way. The finishes at least are like cool. I mean, this I believe is Crack's first magnetic polish. So I think for now I'll put them in B because I feel just very neutral about them, where I would put them ahead of the Young Love shades because those are just like creams. Then in March, we got the Donut Shop collection, which was another 6-piece collection that had these almost frosty, pearlescent, glazed donut inspired finishes that were basically expanding on the one shade that Monique released like initially from like her first collection called Donut Spunk. That was just this like white, frosted, glazed donut sort of polish, and it's her best seller if I remember correctly. Like I've mentioned before, I'm such a fan of like brands recognizing that a polish is like doing well, and then they'll expand that like shade range, if that makes sense. So I thought it was really fun to see this expansion with this glazed donut inspired lineup. It's pretty much like a range of neutrals. There is like one pink and then this one kind of darker gunmetal-y, steely navy color, but the rest are these like neutral shades that I think are just so beautiful. I remember loving this collection like more than I thought that I would, because looking at it and knowing that it has this like almost frosty finish. I feel like a lot of people will just be like, oh, that's just so boring. So I imagine this collection might be in the D tier for a couple of you guys, but I actually really like them. I don't know if I like them enough to put them in the A tier where the vibes are immaculate, because I mean, I do think they like nailed that glazed donut look so well. At the very least, I will put these in the B tier at the very front of it, because I think the finishes, the colors are just so pretty and like elegant, which, you know, again, maybe is not for everybody, but I definitely can appreciate that. Then in April, we have another 2 releases. The first one was the April Fool's Duo, which consisted of a black and white polish. Again, I don't think that I actually reviewed these on my channel, so I'm so sorry about that, but I do remember trying these and I wasn't super impressed. I mean, the white polish was nice. I would say it's pretty similar to Olive Ab Snowy, which like I do really like. I did find that Cracked was maybe like a little bit thinner though, but the one that like left me a little bit underwhelmed was the black polish, because I didn't find it to be like a full one coat black for me. Again, it was just a little bit on the thinner side, and so it just needed 2 coats, which, you know, for a black polish, I definitely expect them to be one coaters. So I kind of have some mixed feelings about where to rank these. I think I would say that they are better than the Young Love creams. They're either gonna be at the end of the B tier or at the front of C. Honestly, I might move them to the front of C just because I feel like since I wasn't super impressed with them, I just had that feeling of like, you know, I'd rather use other brands' black or white polishes. And I feel like nothing says smile and nod more than that. So I know it's not looking super impressive right now. I know that as we go on, there's gonna be more and more filling out the top, so I'm not too worried about it just yet, especially because the other release that we got in April was the makeup collection. This was another 6-piece lineup that had 5 cream polishes and 1 black flaky topper. Obviously with this like makeup inspiration when it comes to the names of the polishes, but the colors were much more on like the typical spring pastel palette, which I think is super cute. And I remember really loving these. Like the cream formulas for these were just so impressive. As you can see from my tier list, I wasn't really super impressed with or loving the cracked polish creams that I've tried so far. So when I saw that this, you know, pastel collection was coming out, I like had my reservations, but then actually trying them on, I was so blown away. And going back to that black flaky topper, it's called mascara flakes. Like that is so freaking perfect. So even though I do think this is an absolutely solid collection, I don't think it's enough to put it in the S tier for me. Like it's definitely a solid A because I do think the vibes are immaculate, but there is a part of me that's like, you know, oh, for being like a makeup collection, I kind of wish there was at least like a shimmery shade or 2, but it's still absolutely solid. Then in the month of May, we had the Gloom and Doom collection, which I thought was so interesting. Even though having like monthly releases can definitely be overwhelming at times, I actually do love it for giving the brands like a chance to explore these different themes and like to do more of them. So obviously with the previous collection, it was like your typical spring pastel kind of color palette, but this collection was inspired by springs in the Pacific Northwest, which are very rainy. So we got these slightly darker or muted kind of colors with like pops of brighter colors because, you know, it's still spring. And I think it's just fun that Monique was able to explore like both sides of spring, if that makes sense, with these 2 releases. So again, overall, like theme-wise, I thought this was so cool. The color palette was also really unique, and I appreciated the mix of like creams and some sort of shimmer polishes. I unfortunately didn't love some of the polishes though, where like, at least on me, they just were a little different than what I was expecting. I don't know if I expected them to be like darker or just like more muted or something, but I just remember having that feeling of like, ugh, like I don't love them on me. So that definitely sucked, but I don't think it's enough to bring it down like into the C tier for me. I think these are a solid B, and I definitely would put them in front of the Dan duo, but I don't know if I would put them in front of the Donut Shop just because I like those like neutral soft finishes. So yeah, I think having them behind that makes sense, at least for right now. Then in June, we got another 2 releases. So we got the Artificial Flavors collection, which was 8 polishes in this rainbow color palette that was inspired by like all these sort of sweet treats. Obviously, I'm gonna love a rainbow for summer, and I thought these shades, especially like the mix of finishes, was so fun because they just all felt so unique to each other. Like I don't think any of the finishes were repeated within the collection, so I really appreciated that. The colors and formulas themselves were also really nice. I actually think there was like that one neutral shade too, so that was also nice. So it's not just a full rainbow. The only kind of letdown I remember having was with, unfortunately, the pink shade in the collection because it just looks so pretty in the bottle, but I feel like unfortunately it was one of those shades that didn't really translate the way that I wanted it to on my nails at least. And I vaguely remember not loving the purple in this lineup too, because I think this was supposed to be a jelly kind of formula, and I sort of struggled with that one, which unfortunately is a little bit common in my experience with some of the cracked polish crullies or jellies. So it's a little hard to say exactly where I would put this collection because it feels like so perfectly in between the A and B tiers for me, where I know that I like it more than Donut Shop and less than the makeup collection, but I'm just wondering, like, should it be in the A tier behind makeup or in the B tier in front of Donut Shop? So I think, yeah, maybe I will keep it in front of the Donut Shop collection, but it's definitely one of those that like could change depending on the day or my mood or something. Also in the month of June, we got this little trio release that was called the 3 Little Pinkies, which were these 3 sheer pink shades, which I really love because I mean, first of all, I just love a classic like your nails but better kind of look. And I really appreciated that Monique gave us 3 of them, where one was like pinky pink, the other was peachy pink, so it's a little warmer, and then we had brownie pink that was obviously a little bit more with like a brown undertone. So I greatly appreciate her giving us options, you know, depending on our skin tones or undertones or even just our general preferences. This might sound so silly because it's like just these 3 sheer pinks, but I just love her taking this essential type of release where, like, you know, these are essential shades to have, but the theme I think was just so freaking cute that it makes me want to put them in the A tier. Definitely behind the makeup collection because, you know, as actual like polishes, I think the colors and formulas for makeup were definitely better. I can imagine so many people being like, oh my god, that is such a boring, yawning type of release, but I love it, okay? So moving on, in July, we got the Beach collection, which was kind of like the second summer release. We went back down to a 6-piece lineup, and I really love this one. I feel like the color palette alone is just so inspired and so unique, but still very on point with what I think of when I think of like going to the beach. Some of the colors had a little bit of this like darker undertone in a way where it's like, you know, normally for summer, I'm expecting like neon shades, super bright, in your face, eye-searing colors. And while we did definitely get like some lighter shades in this release, I really appreciated how like muted some of them were, or just like how dark some of them were for being summer colors, but they were still like so vibrant and so warm, where it's like just looking at the lineup, it's like I can feel the summer heat. I can smell the salt in the air and like feel the sand in between my toes. I just love how well Monique was able to capture all of that with these polishes because it just felt so like unexpected. I honestly am so tempted to put it in the S tier, but then I remember Bliss, which was such a disappointing letdown because it is easily like the standout color from this collection, but I just had such a hard time with the formula on this one. It's one of her crelly finishes and it just wasn't really self-leveling on me. Granted, when I did try it like that first time swatching it for my video, my nails were a lot longer, so maybe that had something to do with it, but it just was such a struggle where I just really like hated how I felt applying it because again, the color is so freaking beautiful. So it goes back to that feeling of just like not loving some of these formulas where like at least this one is supposed to be acrylic, so it's supposed to have that like more squishy sort of finish, but I just struggled with it so much that I like desperately wished it was a cream instead. And I feel like the color, even though it is beautiful, it's pretty similar to a lot of other like teals or turquoise sort of shades that I have, but just with a worse formula, unfortunately. So that alone would definitely knock it down from the S tier, but I feel like because I still love the general collection like so much, I would put it at the front of A, even in front of the makeup collection. And then in August, we got our final summer release, or maybe our first fall release, with the Italy collection. This was another bigger like 8-piece lineup that featured mainly cream finishes. I think there was like a jelly and a crelly or two in there, but there were no like shimmers or other kind of special effects polishes. So again, at this point, I'm just like, I'm a little apprehensive. I don't know how I'm gonna like these. I knew right away the color palette alone, beautiful. Like I love how rustic and rich these shades are. It was especially satisfying releasing in the month of August, where it's like peak summer to fall transitioning, at least for me as a seasonal wearer. So I loved it for all of those reasons alone, but I was just like nervous, about the formulas and how I would like those. The good news though is that they were fantastic pretty much across the board. Like the ones that were described as cream finishes were so creamy, so satisfying, like flawless, impeccable kind of coverage. The Crellies, like Delicacy and Sardinia, I remember just being so blown away by it. I actually don't remember if Kinoto was supposed to be a Crelly or a jelly. In my mind, I would call it a jelly actually, along with the other jelly, Pistachio Butter, which, admittedly, I don't even have that one in my collection anymore. I gifted it to my bestie because she is a Prugly lover. And while I may have come around to some Prugly shades, as you know, that one was really like pushing the limit for me. Just not my cup of tea when it comes to the color, but the formula on that one was like flawless. Kinoto had a little bit more of like a, I don't want to say finicky formula, but where it's like it didn't self-level as easily as Pistachio Butter, for example, but I still just really, really loved it for like the color alone. So this honestly is gonna be an easy S tier, and I would say in front of the Romanticize Your Life collection. I think Italy as a whole is just like the best collection from Cracked Polish. Like I just can't explain enough how much I loved that one. Also in August, we got introduced to the Jelly of the Month series that Monique has been doing. So the first jelly that she released was called Bubblegum Yum Yum, which is obviously this super cute cotton candy bubblegum pink shade, and it is so freaking pretty. Like obviously as a certified pink lover, I'm going to love this polish. The only reason though I wouldn't put it in the S tier, because it has like an amazing formula. It's self-leveled nicely. I didn't really struggle with it at all. But the only reason I wouldn't put it in flawless, no notes, is because to me, I feel like it's a little bit more on like the crelly side, which I know is such like a nitpicky thing where it's just like a very, very pigmented kind of jelly. Because when I think of jelly polishes, I mainly think of the jellies from like Cirque, for example, where the majority of those are very, very translucent and glassy. So no matter how many coats you do, you almost are always going to see through to your nail line. But I know that there are some jellies that like are a little bit milkier, where you still have that, squishy jelly kind of feel with the polish, but it does cover a little bit more of your nail line. So that was the only thing for that polish specifically that I just remember being like surprised at how much it covered my nail line. But I guess that's not like the worst thing because we already had the Three Little Pinkies, which, you know, pinky pink is technically just like a pink jelly. It's definitely a lot more sheer than Bubblegum Yum Yum. So I would put this in the A tier, I think behind the Three Little Pinkies, just because, you know, as like the theme, the marketing of it, I like the Three Little Pinkies more. Then in September, Cracked Polish turned 1 and they celebrated with another new collection. This one was called the Page Turner collection, which was obviously inspired by books and reading and cozy libraries, all of that beautiful aesthetic and lifestyle. I also really love this lineup. One, because there's like, you know, subtle fall rainbow color palette going on, which I'm always going to be a fan of, even though that obviously is not like the main intention. I just appreciate it's like extra satisfying to me. But I thought the colors were just so like rich and warm, like these jewel tone sort of shades. They had so much depth and vibrancy to them, even though they were generally darker. Like obviously the yellow gilded edges is pretty bright for a fall release, but it still feels so fitting. I feel like this one is an easy A tier. I don't think I would put it in the S tier personally. I mean, I could see it there, but I don't know. I'm having a hard time deciding if I like the Page Turner collection more than Beach. Like, obviously, the vibes are immaculate. We know that much, but is it flawless? Honestly, I think it might be because I don't have many like notes for it. Even for the shades that I was anticipating would be like my least favorites, I ended up really liking those, like the green multichrome, even the brown multichrome. I was just like, oh, you know, I'm sure it's gonna be fine or whatever. I figured I just wouldn't like those, but those were such standouts to me. So honestly, I think I might keep that at the end of S tier right now. Like artificial flavors though, I feel like it's just one of those that can really, you know, it toes the line between being in the S or the A tier for me. Also in September, we got another jelly of the month, and this one was called Rolling in the Deep. This is actually the only jelly that I don't have. I haven't picked it up. I have picked up like a few of the other ones, and then Monique started sending me the more recent ones, but I still don't have this one in my collection because I've just been so on the fence about it, where the color is like unique and pretty. I mean, admittedly, it does immediately remind me of Cirque's Verdigris jelly, but this one is obviously like a little bit more blue leaning. So, you know, I considered getting this one for the purposes of doing a comparison, but I just like never picked it up because I was like, well, assuming it is a dupe or it isn't a dupe, I'm just gonna have this extra jelly in my collection and I just don't want to do that right now. So it's hard for me to rank this without having tried it at all. So I guess, you know, to be totally fair, I will put it in B just because it's neutral, but I'd love to know if any of you guys had picked this up, what you think of the formula, the color, like is it unique enough for you? Maybe I will consider putting it on my wish list to grab during like the next sale or something, just so I can, you know, do the comparison and know for sure like how close it is to Cirque's jellies. So anyway, let's move on to the month of October. We got another 2 releases. The collection was called Toxic Wasteland, obviously having a Halloween kind of inspiration, and I thought this was so freaking fun because as you can see, we have a couple of super bright neon shades, really only like one darker shade with the dark charcoal. The rest were on the much more vibrant side, which I think is just so fun for Halloween. So I already talked about it in my nail polish awards video that I just love how fun Halloween releases can be because they can just really vary in their range, where we either see really bright collections like this one or the typical like darker, vampier sort of shades. So So even though as a seasonal wearer, I normally, you know, stick to neons in the summertime, I definitely still love being able to pull out like an obnoxiously bright color in like the off season, for example. So all of that to say that this was another really solid collection for me. I definitely would say that the vibes are immaculate. I think I would put these behind Beach and in front of the makeup collection. My main notes for this, you know, not being like in the S tier, mainly are for two shades. The first one is Holographic Garbage, which first of all has the most perfect freaking name for a nail polish, but unfortunately it is one of those like holographic magnetic formulas that just disintegrates over time apparently. So I don't love that, and unfortunately the shade Ooze gave me a hard time, where I just had like a much more patchy, streaky type of formula. I feel like it was more on the crelly side. I actually don't remember if this is described as a cream or a crelly, but when I talked about it in my nail polish awards video, a lot of people were like, oh my god, did you get a bad bottle? Because my bottle of Ooze was like super creamy, like a very nice typical cream formula. So maybe I did, because if you go back and watch my initial swatch footage of that polish, it just looks like not the best on the first coat, which again is a shame. You know, I wish I had like a consistently better experience with the cream polishes or crelly kind of formulas. I feel like I'm definitely very forgiving of this one for the color alone, because I just love an obnoxious lime green. But yeah, overall, I feel like I just still really, really love the shades, where putting them in These Are Nice is just like too low for me. And then for October, we got the next jelly of the month called I Yam What I Yam. And this one is an S tier. Like, there's not much else to say about it. It is absolutely freaking perfect. It has this beautiful, like, sweet potato kind of color. It's a little caramelly. Well, it feels pretty caramelly, especially being like a jelly kind of finish, where it just looks like syrup on your nails. Oh, it is so freaking beautiful for the fall. I cannot recommend it enough. The only problem now is, where do I put it in the S tier? Because it feels weird putting it like in front of full collections. I guess I will keep them at the end, because I just noticed like the other individual polish releases are also at the end. Then in November, we had 3 releases. So starting with the full piece collection, that was called Food Coma. And it was another 6 polishes with this holiday inspiration or theme. I absolutely adored this one. Like I mentioned in my nail polish awards video, I feel like Monique was able to just perfectly capture the nostalgia of early Christmas memories for me. This is another one that I feel so tempted to put in the S tier, but I do have a note that I feel like is enough to put it down to the A tier. It's for the shade Do Re Mi, which, first of all, love the name, but I just wish that I loved the color more. I think if it was like a little darker or more brown and less beige, I think it would just like really nail it for me. But yeah, I just don't really get like cookie dough vibes from that shade specifically, and it just like, it bugs me because it's like so close to being absolutely perfect. But again, it's definitely still like amazing. The vibes are immaculate. Now, again, the problem is, where would I put it? Maybe like the placement of those doesn't really matter if I have like one in front of the other. But I don't know, like for some of them it matters to me, but then other collections not so much. It's like, okay, yeah, they're just generally in the same tier. We also got this trio of toppers in November called Finishing Touches, and I thought they were so cute. I mean, I think my favorite of the 3 was Broken Ornaments. The gold and silver are, you know, kind of ones we've like seen before, sort of, but I do appreciate at least that it looks like there's more of a size variety in their flakies. So they do stand out in their own way, but obviously the multicolored glitter one is just like broken ornaments in a bottle. It is so satisfying for that time of year. Disclosure, I didn't get to try these either, so, you know, I feel like they should default to the B tier, where it's neutral. And lastly, in November, we got the jelly of the month called Cordially Invited, and I was so excited for this one. I picked it up over Black Friday. So you might remember me swatching it recently in my Black Friday haul video. Such a beautiful like black cherry kind of color, which I feel like, you know, we saw trending, especially over the last year or so. Unfortunately, I didn't have like the best application experience with this one either, where I remember on the second coat it was just like a little patchy and streaky in some spots, which, you know, for a darker shade is really annoying and frustrating to deal with. I mean, I know that's kind of just like the nature of formulas for darker colored jellies, because that's pretty much been my experience with a lot of Cirque jellies too, where they just generally require a third coat to look the best. So, you know, I'll be a little bit more forgiving for that, but I definitely am very forgiving for the color alone. It is so freaking beautiful. I would say it is an easy A tier for me. I guess this is another one where I'm like, oh, I don't know if I would put it in front of Bubblegum Yum Yum or not, because it's such a cute pink. So those two are at least like on equal footing in the same tier. They're not one above the other. It just depends on my mood or the season. And lastly, in December, we saw the Euphoric collection, which was a collab with Ethereal. This was a 6-piece collection where 3 of the shades were from Ethereal, the other 3 were from Cracked, and I admittedly really loved the Cracked side of the collection more. If you remember from my review video of that one, my main issue with the Ethereal shades is that 2 of them just looked so similar to each other. Like, obviously not dupes, but I wish that the base color in one of them was like a little bit darker or something, just to like set it apart even more. But aside from that, I absolutely loved this lineup. There's just something so satisfying about the colors. It is such a shame that these sold out so fast, both on Cracked site and Ethereal site. From what I know though, they are working on restocking these, so, you know, if I have more information, I can put that in the description box or like in a pinned comment or something. But yeah, I would easily put this in the S tier. I would say even above Romanticize Your Life for me. Like, there's just something so satisfying about these. Maybe there is a little bit of recency bias going on, but I don't know. I can just see myself like still really loving this collection way later down the line. So I'm like already looking forward to wearing them again like next winter. And finally, our last release was the December jelly of the month called Sweeter the Juice. This was like a vibrant magenta fuchsia kind of colored jelly. I thought the color was so gorgeous. I just unfortunately again didn't have the best, like most self-leveling formula, where actually I think I may have struggled with that one a little bit more than Cordially Invited, because I remember Cordially Invited like looking pretty evened out on the third coat, but I feel like Sweeter the Juice was still a little bit uneven. But the color like really just saves it so much for me, where if it was, you know, a different sort of color that I just didn't care for as much, I could see myself placing it lower. I feel like this is another one that unfortunately is kind of in between the A and B tier for me, but I feel like because the formula wasn't like super impressive, it probably makes more sense to move it into the B tier. So looking at it, it makes sense having it in B, but now I keep thinking about Cordially Invited and I'm like, I feel like I want to put that in the S tier, which, you know, I know might sound crazy that I'm not putting the cutesy bubblegum pink in the S tier, but I guess, you know, focusing on them being like jellies of the month, Cordially Invited, I Am What I Am, those are like true solid jellies. So this is pretty much my completed tier list. In the S tier, we have the Italy collection, the Euphoric collab with Ethereal, Romanticize Your Life, Page Turner, and then 2 of the jellies, I Am What I Am and Cordially Invited. In the B tier, we have the Beach collection, Toxic Wasteland, Food Coma, the Makeup collection, the Three Little Pinkies trio, and Bubblegum Yum Yum, which was their pink jelly. Then in the B tier, we have artificial flavors, the Donut Shop collection, Gloom and Doom, the Dan Duo, the Finishing Touches trio, and then two of the jellies, Sweeter the Juice and Rolling in the Deep. And finally, for Smile and Nod, I have the April Fool's duo, which was the black and white cream, the Young Love collection, which was another quad of creams, and the Pantone Color of the Year, Peach Fuzz, which was another cream. So I feel like my tiers are pretty evenly stacked for the most part, which is so funny to think of like the very beginning of the video where it was almost like bottom heavy with more of the earlier releases being in like the C tier, which I think I had sort of mentioned that also again in my nail polish awards video where I named Cracked Polish as my brand of the year, because looking back on the year, I'm just like so impressed with all of the releases that they've put out. And I felt like each collection was just getting better and better as the year went on. So I feel like that made sense as I was going through my tier list. Again, this isn't even everything that Cracked Polish has released, but it's like the majority of it, I'm pretty sure. So it just makes me really excited to see like what they're going to be releasing for this year. I already can't wait to share the next release coming soon. So that wraps up my brand recap and collection tier list for Cracked Polish. As always, I can't wait to hear what you think of my ranking, if you agree or disagree. I'd love to know what some of your favorite releases were from Cracked, or even some of your least favorites, if you would put any in the boring, yawning category, because, you know, I feel like there definitely were a lot of releases, and obviously not everyone's gonna love everything. So even though for me, I personally haven't loved like every single crelly jelly sort of formula, overall, I still just like them and can appreciate their place like in Monique's catalog or within like the collection. So, you know, I still appreciate them for that reason. I do wonder why I struggle so much with some of her formulas, because obviously like with my earlier releases last year where I still had longer nails, you know, that can make sense. It's like where some polishes might just need 2 coats on shorter nails, I'm gonna need 3 because my nails are a lot longer. Even after cutting down my nails, I feel like, you know, some of the jellies just weren't the most self-leveling, and I just don't get why, because then I watch Caitlin swatch them and they're just always so freaking flawless. Obviously, I would consider her more of like an expert at painting her nails because she's just so like precise. I admittedly am a lot more messy. I'm heavy-handed, so you know, maybe that does play into it, where I don't have this like light, delicate touch all the time, and I'm not floating my brush the way that I probably should be. So I admittedly should probably revisit some of the polishes that like didn't impress me and see if, you know, I can make them work essentially. I'm curious to know like if you've had that experience with Cracked Polish. I know a lot of you guys have like tried them throughout the year and have really liked what you've tried so far. So hopefully you'll be excited to see my next review of their upcoming Valentine's Day collection. I think that should be up by next Monday. So yeah, let me know any and all thoughts that you have down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!